Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. For me, it's 8:30 Toronto time. Sensei Dauphin, what time is it for you tonight?
5:30.
We love it. We can chat during the introductions, but they're over there on the West Coast. And it excites me to say the time each time because I love that we're traveling with this show now. You know, we started in COVID and nobody could travel to different time zones. So it's so exciting that we're still going and that you're still here with us during this. And so it's real nice to see, and I'm really excited to chat tonight. And we're going to jump right in with Sensei Dave Kovar. And I've got a question for you, Sensei, based on a bit of research I did, which is it says on one of your websites that for you it's martial arts first, instructing second, business third. And I want to ask you what that means to you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been doing martial arts a long time. I opened up my first school about 6 months out of high school in November 1978. So this is my 45th year of having a school full time. And it's been interesting to see all the trends that have happened. But what I've noticed is when people put the business first that are professionals, that all of a sudden that's their main thing. And then they put the teaching second and somewhere third. Oh yeah, I'm a martial artist. It's very hard to have any long-term success. So for me, it always starts out with martial arts first. And what I mean by that is that to do the best you can to live the lifestyle. You're not doing it because I could sell cars, or I could be an insurance broker. Oh, let me try martial arts. No, it's because it's your passion and you love it. And that you can't just have loved it one time. It's kind of like it's something that you've got, you've got to renew by keeping an interest in it, right? And so as you age, of course, your body changes, your training methods change, but you still live in the lifestyle. You're still kind of aspiring to be to the next level. And I think that's half the job of being a good teacher. Because I don't know about you, but if I've ever been to a seminar or some weekend training and I come back to class and I got all these cool drills, or I'm inspired, because of what I learned, everything about my class is better. Even the way I bow on the mat is better because I'm feeling it, right? And so that's half the job of being a good teacher, is being a passionate martial arts. Not all of the job, but part of it. And then half the job of running a successful martial arts school is being a good teacher. We forget that if there's so many people have so many things they can do with their time and effort, and if our floors aren't rocking, we're not going to keep people training. And Stephen Covey had a quote, and went like this: you can't talk yourself out of a situation you behave yourself into. And what that basically means is there's no way you're going to keep somebody from keep someone from quitting training in martial arts if your classes aren't rock solid, if you're not passionate about it. So that's kind of the intention between martial arts first, teaching second, business third. That's kind of the mindset there.
I absolutely love that. I want to throw that to you, Sensei Suino. We've talked about this kind of thing on the show. Do you like that? Martial arts, teaching, business? Does that order work for you?
Well, it's the same reason I got into it, right? Yeah, why I got into the business. I had been doing martial arts for years, went to Tokyo, trained over there for 4 years, came back, couldn't find a dojo I liked. I just couldn't find anything that matched what I had in Japan. So I started a school then, and I'd be honest, I sucked at it for a long time. It's been a number of years and I've kind of figured it out, but still to this day, it's more important to me to be able to train, to learn, to work with other martial artists. And although my martial arts business is going very well, I still consider that, yeah, probably third. That's probably a good place to put it.
What about you, Hanshi Legacy? Let's go to you on that. Sensei Kovar's ideas: martial arts, instructing, business. Does that order work for you?
Well, what I would think is, simply, you have to have a good product to be a good salesman, right? That sort of helps along with it. So like Sensei says, if you had a good martial arts instructors, a good solid school, and the main thing you look at is not the sensei, but the students, and you see that they are turning out a fine product there that will help you along with everything else for sure.
It's funny you say that, Hanshi Legacy. I remember when I joined, I looked at you for the first night and I looked at all the black belts for the next 3 demo nights. And I was like, he didn't teach himself, he taught them. So I want to see what they're doing. And they were all excellent. And that's why I joined. Sensei Dauphin, what do you think?
On the business side, I'm late coming to the game. I think I've always had a business acumen, but my order of operations that I learned from my teachers was always, what is good for the martial arts, make that decision. What is good for your association, make that decision. What is good for your students, make that decision, and put yourself number 4 on that list of priorities. as I've gotten, since Legacy was just saying, I think that's a drop the mic thing, right? You got to have a good product to sell a good product, right? Like, that's period. I'm just kind of getting into now, how do you sell this good product that we have, right? This good martial arts product that we have. How do we get that out? And the more I delve into that, keeping that order of operations clear, the more the dojo seems to grow, the martial arts seems to be good and solid. You know, the community is really strong. The core membership is really good. Those people who love each other and interact with each other and help each other, that's really a good thing that's happening now. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'd say, Sean, is I don't think any dojo that's based on just transactional business is a good dojo. Like, if it's just you pay me, and then if you pay me, I have to give you something. I don't think that's a good model for martial arts business, personally.
Yep.
But as I said, I'm new to it, so I plan to be
you know, I'm even newer, Sensei No Offense. So I'm asking on our behalf and whoever else might, you know, if there's people who are growing Sensei Kovar, a business, and they're a little newer at it. You know, my club in Toronto is even newer than Sensei No Offense talking about. What advice would you give to make that business number 3 the strongest? Obviously, you know, again, your martial arts got to be great. You have to have good teachers, but how are you going to reach people in your community in a way that's more effective than the other dude at the strip mall?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. So first, obviously, the product has to be top notch. You have to be doing it with the right intentions, because people see through that pretty quickly. You know, there's no doubt, you know, people, their gut instinct is often correct with that. So, but then you got to be really willing to work hard. You know, in the old days, there was a time in the late 80s and early 90s, and I can bring you through kind of my perspective of the history of the martial arts business. I'd be happy to talk about it. That would shed some light on this, but you didn't have to work very hard to get the phone to ring. You know, to get people to come in. There was the supply and demand was completely different than it is now. And it's still a great time to be in the martial arts industry, but you have to work really hard. You have to, you know, on top of having a great product, you got to know how to ask and where to go to generate new members, and what to do to keep them. So at the end of the day, it's really, when you first get started, you only really have to work half days. The first 12 hours or the second 12 hours. You know, and so many people that run a martial arts school, they'll show up, you know, at 3:45, you know, clean the dojo real quick for a 4 o'clock class, and at 8 o'clock they're out the door, and they're wondering why it isn't growing. We break it into 3 areas. There's prep time, prime time, premium time. And when you're running a dojo, premium time, when it's all hands on deck, that's when you're packed, right? And everybody, the whole point is to service your students, be on the floor for your students. Prime time is when you're open, but maybe there's a little room for one of the instructors to chat with a student about enrolling, or to, you know, sell a mouthpiece or something like that. And those are always really clear, but the prep time is what makes the difference. And that's all the things you do from, yeah, hey, I've been doing this for 45 years. I was in the office at 7:15 this morning. You know what I'm saying? It's just what I do. And then I make really good use of my days doing all the things that are going to set me up to make the evening classes successful.
You know, what I love so much about this is you're talking about business. And as we talked about in the preamble, I'm doing a competition next week. That just totally applied to my competition training, not running a business. I love the way these answers work. I do actually want to get in. I already have it written down, but not right now, to your journey and what you have experienced 70s, 80s, 90s, and onward. But before we get to the introductions, there's one last little button I want to put on this big concept, which is that it's really important for you to have an ethical, you know, that's on your site a number of times. What does that mean for you to be teaching ethically, to be offering schools ethically?
So I think the only way to do good business is to do good business. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, you want to be successful, treat people right. If you cut corners, you can get some short-term success, but I don't know anybody. And of course, I don't know any other industries really very well. This is what I know, right? But I've seen the industry where there's some guys that was killing it. And you heard about this guy that was making all this money selling martial, you know, lessons, yada, yada, yada. Guess what? 3 years later, he's gone. You don't hear, never to be heard from again, because he wasn't, you know, he was basically he was leading with his, you know, worrying about what it was going to be his bank account. And by the way, you got to make a profit to be in business. There's nothing wrong with making a profit to be in business, but the whole idea is it's slow and steady wins the race. And when, like for an example of ethical businesses, is that we never do hard sales. And, and I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with giving someone an offer to get them to enroll today, give them some incentive, I get it. I just don't do it. Someone comes in, if they want to talk to their husband or wife, go for it, man. Am I that worried that you're not going to come back, that I'm going to kind of, so we try to make our product so good that it speaks for itself. And then we charge a fair price, and we're not cheap. We're not cheap at all, but then we get them and keep them. We don't do upgrades. Once you get in the program, our goal is to keep you training as long as possible. End of story. And so we try to make sure that I never want to come off salesish or gimmickish. I want to come off as, I sincerely believe in what we do. And I'm actually teaching grandkids of people I taught as kids now, third generations, right? And it's really interesting to see the perspective when people will come back as adults and say, Mr. Kovar, let me tell you, now that I've had a chance I trained with you for 10 years through school, and let me tell you what it did for me and how it shaped my life. I haven't heard that once or twice or a dozen times. I've heard that 100 times, and enough to where I know at my core. And that means something to me. And I'd much rather make, a dollar, how do I say this, every day, forever, versus $100 a day, one day, and nothing after that because I push too hard. You know what I'm saying? In the long term, it's a better, you can make a really good living teaching martial arts, and you don't have to be slick. Just teach really good quality martial arts. By the way, there's so many business systems that we can go into that you have to do. You call people when they don't show up. You set their expectations. You give them feedback on what they're doing well and how they can improve. And, all those kind of stuff, you have to do that as well. But right, at the end of the day, your intentions have to be in line with what the student needs.
I love that. And, it's funny because I'm working with a coach right now, and he hit a possible limit with the guy he was working with and tried a new guy. And the old guy gave him the hard sell, said, you need to decide right now for life if you're with me or not. And he went to the new coach, and the new coach said, come with me or not, but take a month to decide this is really important for you. And that other coach is very good. So the guy's like, one guy's pressuring me and trying to make me feel fear of loss and sign on the dotted line today. And the other guy's saying, you need to consider what's best for you and take your time. And he goes, so obviously I went with that guy. And he ended up being very happy with the decision. But I love what you're talking about in terms of ethics, and people need a chance to walk away and come back and not feel like they're being sold something, a little rusty underneath.
And by the way, most people don't need to, but if they need to, they need to. And, one of my dads taught me something. He says, if someone ever gives you an ultimatum, you always do the reverse. If someone says this, you have to do this or else, go the or else every time, because that's not a person that you want to be interacting with.
Before we go to the intro, Sensei Suino, I see you nodding with so many things. Is there anything you want to add before we,
Well, I think, I don't know if it's a luxury or if it's the way we set out, but I know Hunchy Legacy School, I know Randy School, my school, we want people who are there because they love to be there. We want to build serious martial artists. So we don't lead with the bank account. We've always led with the martial arts. And that allows us not to be salesy. If someone comes to me and says, look, I'm just not happy, then let them go, because why do you want them polluting the environment for everybody who does want to be there, right? And in the long run, I love what you said, Master Kovar, about, I'd rather make $1 a day forever than try to squeeze a bunch of money out of people up front. Taking out the money analogy, the same, I think, goes true as I'm sure you agree. Same goes true with the martial arts. I'd rather build serious martial artists one step at a time, slowly, than try to fill the dojo overnight and then discover that people are there for the wrong reasons, or that they all leave.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a good one. I already love the specificity with which we're digging into everything. Like I said, my name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. I'm dripping sweat. This room does not have air conditioning. It's hot here in Toronto, and I actually feel great about it. We're talking about the different time zone on the West Coast. And I know that Sensei Suino and Sensei Dauphin spent some time together. I can't do the math on this accurately because I don't know everything that happened at times when I was living away, but it's at least 175 trips that we've all done to see each other or together And I'm sure that I have that like wrong by half. And I just think about the 30, 40, 50 years of this all between us. And I love that the different time zones up to and including, you know, Japan and everything in between are part of our training together. And I think what I love as much, you know, Sensei Dauphin and I just saw each other like 2 days ago, is that it's not always for training. You know, it's also just for fun stuff. So I'm here with Sensei Randy Dauphin, who is in the same room with Hanshi Gary Legacy, which is a first. And then on the other square is Sensei Suino. We were all a little freaked out by that because we felt like we were missing a square. And Sensei Dauphin is going to introduce our guest tonight.
Thanks, Bez. And I'm gonna have to lean forward because normally the dojo's behind me, and I don't see good. I'm wearing my wife's glasses, so if I stumble a little bit, please forgive me. So Kovar Sensei is the founder of Kovar Systems and Kovar Satori Academies. Again, name it what it is, right? Like I like that right away when you read it. It's what it is. He started his martial arts journey in 1972 as a teenager, and he's following in the footsteps of his older brother, Tim. He earned his first black belt in Kempo Karate, May 1977. I was 6, not trying to date anybody here, and I'm old. So Kovar Sensei, he loved to spar and compete. He competed in over 200 martial arts tournaments in forms and fighting forms from 1974 to 1989. And for more context, 1989 is when I joined karate. He won his first place over 90 times, including 4 grand championships, sparring titles. And in 1982, he was rated California Competitor of the Year. In 1988, he won the United States Martial Arts Championships men's heavyweight division in Reno, Nevada. Master Kovar is an 8th degree black belt who holds rank in many different arts. He considers himself, we were just talking about this, martial artist first, instructor second, and businessman third. And we're just preaching the benefit of having that. He's also, like Sensei Suino and Sensei Legacy, he's an author of multiple books. He's a businessman, and he's developed the ProMAC system to help other martial arts owners learn how to run a successful business, right? And what I like about that is it's to help other. That word help, I think, is a really important part of that sentence. Kovar Sensei is recognized worldwide as an innovator of best practices for ethical martial arts schools. Again, ethical, good word to include. He believes strongly in doing business in a way that puts students and the martial arts first, in line with his guiding principles. And I just kind of want to read his mission, right? His mission on his website says, "We want to help school operators to improve all aspects of school operations. Our programs focus on student acquisition, student retention, and staff development." Staff development, I think, is really important because that's succession. We provide integrity-based coaching and community resources to school owners that grow your business. You can count on us to deliver effective solutions that will help you attain unprecedented levels of success. All those words resonate with me, all of that stuff. So I'm super excited to have Sensei Kovar on here tonight. The preamble was fun, like we were chatting before. I know this is going to be a great show. Thank you so much, Sensei Kovar, for coming on today.
Honored to be on the show, guys. Really, sincerely. Nothing funner than talking about what we do. It's a great life.
Thanks so much. And thanks, Sensei Dauphin. And for everybody who's watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, hit that subscribe and like button. We're so happy you're here. And for the people who've logged on live with the Zoom call, we have the chat button at the bottom of the screen. And when you drop your questions in there, we will then ask them of our guest, and you get to be part of this living history. And like I've talked about, this second 100 round of episodes is just revealing itself to be epic and broad. And I think you want to be as much a part of that as the first 100. So we're really happy you're here. We can't wait for those questions. Sensei Kovar, what brought you into your first dojo and what kept you there?
Great question. So it's interesting. I actually grew up in Montana, in Bozeman, Montana, and in the mid 60s, we were on a family trip somewhere. I think we were in Billings, and I saw a silhouette of a guy doing a flying sidekick. I would have been 5 or 6, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. It's kind of like I didn't find martial arts; martial arts found me. And at the time, of course, kids didn't do martial arts for a couple of reasons. First off, there was nowhere to do it. Number two, it was considered kind of, you know, you didn't have, it was rough and violent and all that kind of stuff. And my father wasn't having any of it. So we eventually moved to California, and I started wrestling in seventh grade. And I did that for 3 years. And my older brother, Tim, went away to college for a year and did a year of Taekwondo training, actually in Rocky Mountain State in Montana, in Billings, actually. Came back and said, you got to let Dave do karate. So I signed up at the local Kempo Karate Studio in September of 73. So actually 50 years ago next month. I still have a relationship with my instructor, Hachi Bruce Judnick. And so I just kind of, you know, just took to it, man. I don't know that I was gifted necessarily, but I absolutely loved it. And it was my tribe. It was, you know, I would basically take the bus at 3 o'clock, get dropped off by the school, and my dad or mom would pick me up at 9 o'clock that night. I lived at the dojo, you know, 6 days a week, all through high school. And I was teaching by the time I was probably, and by the way, some of you old timers might remember these. There was Tracy's Karate Studios. It was a big chain in the 60s and 70s. And they actually had some relatively decent business systems, but it was based on a private lesson system. Every student got one private lesson a week. Well, if you have 100 members, that's 100 private lessons a week. It's hard for somebody to do. So very quickly, by the time I was about 15, I was teaching private lessons, and I had no clue what I was doing, but I kind of enjoyed it. And I fell into a school. My instructor, I had a Kohai. He was older than me, but he was my junior, that had opened up a school that wasn't doing very well. And so I actually took it over about 6 months out of high school, and it was in a kind of a beater community, kind of not a nice part of Sacramento. And I took it over with 6 students, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I had 3 things going for me. Number one, I saved and secured a loan from parents. So I had passion for what I was doing. My rent was really cheap, and I lived at home, you know. So and then what happened was, as some of you guys, maybe Hanchi Legacy might remember, but you know, back then, this was before Karate Kid, and there was no kids doing martial arts. There was very few. I think I had the biggest program in the kids for the county. I had like 11 kids. The rest were all adults, but I didn't keep stats, so I really couldn't tell you how many students I had. And so I struggled for several years through the early 80s. And then there's that movie that came out. Let me think, what was it called? Oh yeah, Karate Kid. Boom. And overnight, we just blew up. Like, I couldn't even process. By the time for a few years, I was supplementing my income by painting houses by day and teaching karate in the evenings. And I remember one time I just gotten back off of work, and it's, you know, got paint out of my fingernails. I raced to the dojo. It's 3:30, and there's like a line of parents waiting to enroll their kids in the program. It was the right time, right product, right place. It was just the perfect storm. And so I brought my brother on, who was older, who had not been training for a long time now, to be my business partner. And it just went gangbusters. By the early 90s, our headquarters school that we still had, we had over 900 members in one location. That's a legitimate number. I'm not making that up. And so that, because I had a business partner, my brother, I was able to focus on teaching. So early on, we started teaching systems. And at the time, I was going to not only martial arts seminars, but, you know, Zig Ziglar seminars, and Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Stephen Covey and all this stuff. And I was implementing that into our huddle discussions for our kids program. And pretty soon other schools started looking. And then in 1993, I did a video series called How to Teach Martial Arts to Kids. It was a VHS tape and a little booklet. And once again, it was the right product. It just blew up. Yeah. And we just sold, you know, tons of them all over the country. And that's when we kind of started dipped our foot into the water for coaching. And then we just grew organically, you know, over time. I really never had a grand plan, you know. By the way, I'm the guy that'd be happy to be in a dojo all day and never leave. We opened up multi locations because my brother and I were partners, and that was kind of the dream. That was the dream, and I was fine with it. And we also had guys that were ready. You know, they were like, we wanted to provide a future for them, so we just organically expanded. In the early 2000s, we attempted a national expansion. We were we were approached by a venture capitalist out of New York, and refused with millions of dollars. And the whole, literally, I'm not making this up, and with the intention of building a national chain. And so we went from 4 locations where we were when he found us to 20 locations in a year and a half. And these are corporate owned commercial facilities.
Okay.
And we successfully identified what doesn't work. Got in a lot of trouble. It took us years to battle out of that. You know, we just recently
Right.
actually got on the other end of that. So, but it's been a great experience. And, you know, getting kicked in the teeth is a good thing. You know, you learn from it.
So I want to come back to that in a sec, but I actually want to touch on one idea that we won't go around the horn on because we have all talked about this, but you said you still have a relationship with your first sensei. How
Yes, sir.
important is that? Why? Is he still your teacher? Why does that matter?
Well, you know, I mean, there's a special place. I don't train with him a lot per se. You know, I don't go and take lessons with him, but I'm as tight with him as I ever have. You know, there's you know, he was my first sensei, and, you know, obviously honor and loyalty are a big part of martial arts training, right? And
Yep.
we've had some rough patches through the years, not, you know, without a doubt. You know, you get to a point where, you know, I want to go one way and he doesn't think. It's the shuhari, you know, concept, right? You know, and so you know, we've not always agreed on things, but we're in a place now where, you know, I've always had massive respect for him, and you know, where we converse. I probably talk to him probably at least once a month, and I
Yeah.
probably see him 4 or 5 times a year. And I will, you know, it's just now it's it just, you know, it's the right thing to do. You know, he's the guy that really you know, I think I would have loved, honestly, martial arts wherever I went, but I don't know that for sure. But I sure did love it where I went with him. So I got to give him that credit.
Right. So it's funny you say that because of martial arts. I mean, I'm on this call with my first, second, and third senseis for different times and arts, but I still will contact my first real good acting teacher and just say hi. And he's like, Sean, no one does this. Like someone I met 20 years ago. And I got that from martial arts. And he goes, I appreciate it every time. Now, something I do want to go around the horn on, you know, you started teaching when you were 15, you started running a club just out of high school, and you said, you know, you had no idea what you're doing. What is the benefit of starting to teach before you're ready? Because everyone on this call can address that.
Do you want me to start?
Oh yeah, sorry, Sensei Kovar, that's for you. Yeah, and then we'll.
Okay, yeah, you know, I think I had a mentor tell me if someone's half ready, they're ready. And I've never forgotten that. And, you know, the idea is that, you know, right now I've been teaching a long time, and I'd like to think I can step out on the floor and go to a dojo and teach a pretty good class without really preparing for it. But let me tell you, when I prepare for it, it's a lot better, right? So that's first off. Is still, but the other thing is that wasn't always the case. And, you know, you can't expect somebody to come polished and good to go. There's that time that you know, they've got to have that experience. You know, wisdom comes from experience remembered. And you want to have a wise teacher, they have to have been out on the floor and you know, struggled a bit. And you want to try to set them up for success by giving them as many good tools as you can out of the gate. But with that said, we you know, you got to let somebody, like my kind of rule of thumb is when I'm training a new instructor, as long as it's something not anything morally wrong or any safety issue, if they're not doing something technically correct, I kind of let it go and I address the challenges later. I don't go in and bail them out, so to speak. You know, and that's worked for us.
Right on. Sensei Dauphin, I see you nodding to that last bit. And I also know I will disagree with you that you think you weren't a great teacher when you started. I do. But what are your thoughts on starting teaching pretty darn young and pretty early in your path?
Well, you said before you're ready, and you mostly in life, you do all the important things before you're ready. You're not ready to be married. You're not ready to have a kid. You're not ready to go to kindergarten. You're not ready to go to university, leave your city, buy a house. I think martial arts is just as important as any of those other things. But like all of those other things, you probably shouldn't do it if you don't have some, like, you know, I became a parent, I still had parents. So I had somebody to go back to and say, you know, I went to university. I knew people who had gone to university that I could go. And when I started teaching karate, while I might not have been ready and I might not have been as good at it, I had Sensei Legacy, and it was a weekly thing. Sensei, like I have this student, I don't know what to do with them, and he would help me with those things. And I still do that. Like, I mean, after 26 years of teaching, when there's Iaido problems, I still go to Sensei Suino and say, this person will not do this thing, and or Sensei Legacy, and the same thing with karate, right? So yeah, I don't think we're ever ready for those things, but you gotta embrace being uncomfortable. And if you're a martial artist, you usually can embrace that better than other people.
Right on. Hanshi Legacy, what do you think? You started teaching really quickly.
Well, it was a slightly different situation back in 1968, 1969. There were not in Canada. I imagine it was different in the United States. We didn't have really a lot of honest to goodness karate teachers. A lot of people learned it by day and taught it by night, just because at that time that's the way that was the situation in the martial arts. I believe I said this before, that it was our generation from thereafter that got full styles and started putting together, and with the help of the United States. For Canadian, going to the United States is a pool of knowledge, because their Marines went over there and brought a lot of it over. So in my situation, like I said, it was prior to that explosion in Canada. So my sensei let me start teaching before I really should have, on a brown belt level or something like that. But it's best to have a little experience and no experience. And then with that, you can learn how to grow as a teacher.
Right on.
Yeah. Nowadays, there are a lot of people who will be masters, and that's hopefully a whole different concept.
Yeah. Sensei Suino, what about you? You came back looking for a teacher and there wasn't anyone, so you just figured, I guess it's me. That sounds like a little bit before you were ready.
Well, that was the second time around, right? So I had started as an adult. I'd started karate in college, and I just wanted to help, right? So and I think, like a lot of dojo owners, if you have a student who really wants to help, you give them an opportunity. And it seems like the majority of people, if you put them in that, I said Master Kovar's muted. Let me unmute him. Maybe this will help. There you go. Good. It seems like the vast majority of people, if you put them in a situation where you ask them to teach, they're going to get better. It changes their mindset. They're not just in there working for themselves. You've said, hey, help this other person. They help. Most people get a little bit better. They take it a little more seriously. They learn from the interaction. You keep doing that over and over. There's something inherently growth positive about asking people to help others. So I think that idea of teaching before you're ready is perfect, man. Now, of course, there's going to be a few people that just fail, but I think that's a minority. I think most people rise at least somewhat to the occasion.
Yeah, I know when I started teaching in Los Angeles, it really, I don't know if it focused my training. It gave it the pathway much more clear, because I had to offer the pathway. And like Sensei Dauphin said, it made me call my teachers more and go, hey, what do I do in this situation? Or what do you do when someone does this? And I think it was the greatest gift for me to focus, because if I was going to offer something, I had to be able to understand and explain it, and therefore be doing it. So Sensei Kovar, you touched on it a bit, but is there anything you want to add? Because I know you talked about your pathway and the benefit of the 80s and the Karate Kid, but you did talk about the difference of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's something we've talked about on other shows. And I never get tired of just asking, in the 70s, there's a certain vibe, there's a certain feel.
Yeah.
I imagine the pedagogy must have been different. What ethical meant must have been different.
Yeah. So when I started, it was the Bruce Lee craze, right? That was it. And Enter the Dragon, as the samurai began, is when Enter the Dragon came out, and Kung Fu was on TV, and I lived for that show. And what was ironic is Kempo, like American Kempo guys, could kind of swing to karate or Kung Fu or somewhere in the middle. So a lot of the guys at our dojo actually wore Kung Fu uniforms, because that was the cool thing to wear at the time, right? And what was really interesting about that era for me was I didn't know any better, but it wasn't as much. But the kind of my role models at that school they were good guys, but there was really no they were kind of the guys that trained this night. Let's go out to the club and see what we can make work in the bar tonight. That was all kind of the mentality. And it was kind of, that was the age then. I learned so much, in my instructor and I joke about it all the time. I learned what not to do in a martial arts dojo by watching what happened. I didn't even want my dad to go into the school to pick me up because I was worried if he saw what was going on. Like as soon as the clothesline would go on, beers would pop out. There was a ashtray, there was an ashtray in the lobby and people were smoking constantly. And, there was a lot of inappropriate, things happening in the dojo that you'd never get away with now, and unsafe classes, and the list goes on. But that was kind of, it was kind of still the Wild West. And if you look at it was kind of the blood and guts era still, and then the first 3 years I fought as a black belt, it was still, you could wear gloves, but it was bare knuckle stuff. And I remember going to the internationals, which was the big tournament back then. And it used to be on a cement floor at Long Beach Internationals in the Long Beach Arena, and sweeps and takedowns, groin kicks, okay, 3 seconds on the ground. And it was no headgear. You think about that now. And of course, theoretically, you're not supposed to hit somebody in the face, but you all know how that went, right? And so that was kind of I think guys were really tough then. I think that the athletes are way better now, no doubt about it, because they've learned more, but they were tough guys back then. And then I think, in the 80s is when the kind of the late 70s is when the Taekwondo push kind of happened. That was that big influx. And then in the 80s, it was the ninja craze. Mid 80s, then the Karate Kid came into play. And then of course, in the early 90s, it was Ninja Turtles. And then of course, UFC came, boom, 93. Right in the winter of 93, and that changed everything. And so then I remember I've been doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Of course, my first start was actually wrestling since May of 94. So it's my 29th year, right? And I remember when I got started, I was no other guys were doing it. I just kind of felt like that's where I remember guys saying it's just a craze. It's not going anywhere. It's just a craze. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think it is, man. I think it's here to stay. And so it's been interesting to see how, MMA and Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu have really stepped up a lot. And by the way, I have nothing but respect for traditional karate, and I love all the arts. But there are certain things that I love about. There's things I don't love about what's MMA's brought to the table. I've kind of got a love-hate relationship with it, But I do. There's a lot of benefits as far as is what I feel is things that I should be teaching my students as to what I used to do. And so it's been interesting to see. Overall, I think there's a lot of areas where we're not as good, but I think the quality of martial arts in most areas, and by the way, I guess a lot of you guys would disagree with me, but is actually better. And what I mean by that is, yes, there's more kids than there used to be, no doubt about it, okay? But if you compare apples to apples, back like when I first opened up a school, or the first few years I was a competition school, and I don't know how many students I had, but I was very proud of all of them because we'd go to tournaments and we'd win all the time. But what I didn't take into consideration is all the people that I'd bring to tournaments were already tough before they started. They didn't really need martial arts. What I did is I weeded out all the people that really needed this by being too hard, too hardcore, too soon. So all the people that could really benefit from martial arts training, I scared them away. So what I had is a handful of tough guys. Like they didn't, and so what I've learned to do is cast a broader net initially to make sure the experience. I want to help people that aren't natural athletes, or aren't naturally intense or gifted, and I want to help them become their best. And that's, so if you compare, a 45-year-old gal that's going to test for her black belt with us in 3 weeks to the 45-year-old gal in 1975 that tested your black belt. Well, guess what? There wasn't one in 1975. It's really not a fair comparison because we scared her away at Orange Belt. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't think it's ever a fair comparison to really do that. You have to look at the actual person.
I just want to pop in there because Hanshi, you have a similar timeline. Do you think that that's accurate, that the tough guys survived, the tough women survived, but the others maybe, are benefiting more now?
Well, when I was building my dojo, not everybody, in my opinion, again, I stand to be corrected, not everybody can become, let's just say for this, a 10th Dan. What I mean is a full out blown grandmaster of karate. So there are a lot of other steps in there that you can land at, which is your own strengths and you can't say, even though you try your hardest, you can't become a 10th Dan. So we have to teach everyone, but the people who are karate, or you would always pick as people like Matsumura, Itosu, Fizukize, Nick Swino, you know what I mean? Like that, persons that exemplify and have become the full art. But there's always room for everyone else. So it's very, very difficult. And it takes you probably, in my opinion, and in Sensei Sandoval's opinion, it takes 35 years to become a karate grandmaster. So you have to be able to fit everyone else in there, but you're still looking for that person who's going to be the student who becomes the grandmaster, because he is the guy who's going to keep it together. Because who are going to teach the 7th dance? Who's going to teach the 8th and 9th dance? Who? If you don't have that person that does it all his life and can push through and has that ability. So it's sort of a tossed question, I guess.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more. You know, the bottom line is that you want the people that would have survived in the era, but we want to make sure, I think the modern instructor needs to also take into consideration someone's natural attributes. And that doesn't mean you give them anything they don't deserve, but what I hear you saying is you help them to realize their potential, whatever that might be. You know, you're not making them a grandmaster just because they try hard and they've been with you a long time. You know, that's a sacred thing that you got, but you're still going to do everything you can to keep them training with you as long as possible, so they can evolve to the best of their abilities. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, basically, yes. But also, you know, you said the thing at the beginning, and I nudged him when you said it, is that people delve in different martial arts and because they want to get better, which is fine. But when they go to learn from different martial arts, they go to a guy who's been there a long time. Because
I didn't want to interrupt you because I couldn't agree with you more. Like I've told people, I've got a black belt in multiple styles and I'm pretty good at a lot of things, but I'm not great at anything. And I know that, you know, and if you go to me, you want to be a jiu-jitsu champion, don't go to me, go to someone that's done nothing but that. You know, if you want to be the best Kabuto practitioner you can, hey, I've been training Kabuto for almost 30 years, but don't come to me because I haven't given it as much time. I'm not the guy. So I couldn't agree with you more. You know, I definitely am a generalist in it, and I will search out people that have done their one art their whole life. But that's not for everyone. Like I think I have a bad case of martial arts ADHD. I would have probably got bored if I did that. I like the cross training element, and I also, from my experience, there's only so many ways the elbow bends, and when I do Filipino weaponry, it actually makes my kempo better because there's so much things that are related, and I've seen the connection. But I have nothing but respect for someone that's just put their binders on and focused on their art and made it the best they possibly can and made that their life study. No doubt about it.
Yeah, those are the persons who keep the art alive. Because, you know, the harder people to teach are the guys from the red belts and up. You know, if you don't have that long-lasting knowledge, how do you keep masters and highly intelligent people, you know, following the path? I think we agree.
I want to actually ping back, Sensei Kovar, to what you mentioned about training with different people. And I think we've had someone mention the name, but I don't think we've had a real conversation about Grandmaster Junri. And I'd
Trained
love
with him for years. I got my 4th degree black belt under him. I know him incredibly well. Stayed at my house a dozen times.
We'd love to hear about him.
Amazing man, amazing man. I tell you what, I get goosebumps when I think about him. And I first met him in November. Actually, I went to a martial arts business seminar in 1987. It was right after I was telling the Karate Kid came out. I gave up painting. I'm full-time. I'm trying to figure this business out because I have so many students. I don't know what to do with it. And my Kempo background unlike like a Okinawan or karate or Japanese karate background, where there was way more structure and respect. The American Kempo guys, there really wasn't much of that. You know, I grew up, it was everybody's first name basis, and I just didn't know any different, you know. And like I said, the guys were, the role models were different. And I'm not saying that's everywhere in American Kempo. It was just my filter from what I saw. And then here I go to this seminar in Southern California. It's a 3-day seminar. Basically, it was Friday morning to Sunday night. It was 3 days we slept in the dojo, and it was 12-hour days, literally. And I meet this Korean guy, Grandmaster Junri. And of course, everybody knew who he was, right? He was Bruce Lee's training partner. And to me, he was the epitome of a grandmaster. And what I mean by that, he lived, eat, breathed martial arts. He was, you know, super respectful, he was fit. You know, and that's when I first kind of had a concept of of imparting life skills to our students. I really never occurred to me before that. But one of the stories, so I trained with him as part of his organization for almost a decade. It was a really hard thing to do because Kempo and Junri Taekwondo were so different. I was trying to teach them both, and one of them you have your hand here, and other, you know, it was just really. So what I had is my guys, we couldn't do anything very well, and so I had to kind of make a decision and drift away from it. But a couple of things. First off, I wrote this letter to him, basically saying I'd love to stay friends, and I'll always look up to him, but I'm not going to teach his style anymore. And I was ready for him to say, get out of here, never talk to me again. And he could not have been more gracious, you know. But earlier, there was one time where he was doing his 2 experiences that I'll never forget with Junri. Grandmaster Ree and I are doing an early morning workout in my living room. And at the time, he would have been about my age, maybe a couple of years older, okay, but mid-60s. And I'm holding a paddle for him. This is 6 a.m. I'm holding a paddle for him, and he's trying to make his left leg spinning hook kick better. And I remember stopping for him, and I go, sir, you really like martial arts, don't you? And he looked at me, he goes, are you kidding? I love it. Here he is, mid-60s, still trying to make his weak leg kick better. I loved that. But then fast forward to the early 90s, he was awarded by President Bush Sr. He was awarded the Outstanding Asian American Award for his work in the community. And he was awarded in LA, and he called me on the phone and said, sir, I'm get a chance to be awarded at a presidential dinner. I'm getting an Outstanding American Asian American Award. They're easy for me to say, award. And I have a chance to do a demo. Could you bring some of your kids, and could we do a martial arts demo at a presidential dinner? And of course, what do I say? Of course. And I knew all his forms, his martial ballets that he did. So I'm on so I fly down there. And by the way, I got to meet the president. I got a picture with him and my students. It was very cool. And there's a whole other story about how that happened, but because it wasn't supposed to. But I'm staying with him. I'm rooming with him. And that morning, at the time, he was doing 1,000 push-ups a day, every day. Now, you can argue whether that's good for you or not, but that's what he was doing. Okay, you might. And that morning, we do 5 sets of 100 push-ups. By the way, he does 5 sets of 100 push-ups. I attempt to do 5 sets of 100 push-ups, right? and I'm with him all day, and and we go to the presidential dinner, and he meets some of his Korean friends afterwards, and he stays out with them, and I go back to the hotel room. He comes back at 11:30 that night. And I don't want to, as much as I love Grandmaster Ree, I did not want a late night lecture that I knew if I was awake, he was going to give me a lecture on something. And so I pretend like I'm asleep, and he doesn't want to wake me up. He quietly takes off his dress shirt, and I watch him drop down and do 5 sets of 100 push-ups. And it was like, when you think lead by example, that guy did it, better than anyone. Now, he was not without his faults, of course, but he was an amazing guy. And, I was fortunate I got to interview him. I did one of the last interviews of him probably 2 months before he passed a few years back. And just, I have nothing but admiration and respect for what he did and what he represents and what he attempted to do and the man he was.
I just want to comment. I mean, what an incredible thing for him, but also for you. I mean, here you are getting to meet the president as a function of being a kid who decided to follow the passion of the martial arts. Like you're probably not thinking that when you're 15.
Well, here's the interesting thing.
Yeah, me to meet George.
I got to tell this story about meeting the president. So we show up, and by the way, I told everybody and their cousin I was going to do a demo for the president. So let's just clear. I called up, distant relatives. Everybody gave me a hold of. And I show up, and we show up, and it's in this convention center that's, in LA somewhere. And the fire marshal has changed the rules so they won't let that many people in the room. And so we find out we're never even the president's going to be not even show up until after we do our demo. We're never going to be in the same room as he is. And I'm going, And so we're in another room with a big screen TV so you can see the president when he shows up. And there's no security in this room, by the way. There's very little. Like there was a bunch when we get into the main room to do the demo, and I'm kind of going, oh man. So I'm there. I'm with 3 kids. We're in my martial arts uniforms, and all of a sudden you hear some people whispering and talking. All of a sudden the doors fly open, and in walks President Bush with a security detail, and he looks around the room and he sees a bunch of people in suits, and he sees some guy with some kids in martial arts uniforms, walks right over to us. And he goes, oh, you here? Great. And it turns out he trained, he was actually Grandmaster Reed taught him lessons. Oh, you're here with June. Oh, I love that guy, yada, yada. And then you ever had the time when the camera's not, you can't get the picture, your camera to work? You guys ever had that experience? Well, that's what happened when we were trying to get a picture. The camera wouldn't work. It was like, oh, no one's ever going to believe me. We turned out we did get the picture. But yeah, that was my experience meeting the president.
Nice.
We had a question come in from Sensei Copeland, who's been one of our guests. He's the like 5th member of the Beatles as far as this show goes. And I clocked this as well while you were talking with your dates, those exact dates with the UFC. This came out, this came out. He asked really simply, what do you attribute your great memory to?
You know, my wife would question that a lot. You know, I don't know that I could tell you what I had for lunch today, but I just remember that stuff. You know, I think you remember places and times that are important to you. You know what I'm saying? When you're mentally, physically, emotionally involved in something, you know, it kind of, you know, they just, and so there's probably a lot of stuff I forget. And I think over time you tend to rehash the same memories and maybe forget some others. There's probably a lot of gaps I could fill in. I'll take it as a compliment, but I don't know that it's as good as you know, he thinks it is, but thank you.
You know, this is just out of the blue. It's a question I want to ask you, but it's something I'm picking up. How important is humility in the martial arts? Because while you're talking about the success of your schools and while you're talking about this, I know you're being very genuine when you say to Hanshi Legacy, I'm not as great as I'd like to be at all these arts. Or you're talking about Junri, like you're deferring to him and saying, I can't teach your thing very well. Even after 10 years, like, you have a humility about this, and I'm asking, did the martial arts give you that, and how important is it?
Well, I think if you train in martial arts, you know, it's easy to stay humble because you realize how much there is to learn, right? And that's the thing about, like, for me, like training in different arts, it's like it's so easy to realize that you don't know anything. And my experience is the more I train, the less I know. You know, there's so much more to learn. And I had a couple examples on both ends of the spectrum when it came to, like, one of my good friends and one of my mentors is Ernie Reyes Sr. He's an amazing guy, you know, Grandmaster Ernie Reyes Sr. And he has always been, for me, like, I have the privilege, the fortunate privilege, I speak pretty regularly. And he's been, like I said, a mentor from never my teacher, but my older brother, my martial arts older brother for 40 years. And I look at the way he interacts and how sincere he is with people. And, you know, it was something that is like, wow, and I've seen the other side. I've seen the false humility, and I've seen the guys that walk up and introduce themselves as senior great grandmaster, you know, type thing. And, you know, I have nothing wrong with giving someone the respect they deserve, but I always appreciate it when people don't demand it, that they earn it. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that I never, you know, I don't care what you call me. You can call me, you know, Master Kovar or Dave. It doesn't really matter. You know, it's like I understand the importance of titles, and we use them in our schools. But I'm not so caught up in it that I not forget that we all put our pants on one leg at a time. And I've got a great story of the example Chuck Norris sent at a time I'd love to share with you guys that I had firsthand with him, that really was probably the most mind-boggling sense of how to interact with others that I've ever been exposed to.
Go for it. Let's hear that.
All right, man. So you guys remember Sidekicks, the movie Sidekicks? So it was about 30 years ago, and it was one of his last feature films, I think. And this is when he was at the height of his success. You know, this is when he's the most popular right then. Now, the younger generation, they only know him for Chuck Norris jokes. That's all they know him for, right? and I've had the privilege of actually, interacting with him. Like, I don't know that he remembers my name now, but there was a time that he knew me. And I've probably hung out with him a dozen times or close to it, starting in the the mid 70s. Actually came up to Sacramento. I got 75 or something. I probably got 10 pictures at various times. But so because I had a relationship with him, he was promoting this movie Sidekicks, and he went to 21 cities over 22 days. And he came to Sacramento on day 22. And because I had a relationship with him, they picked us to run security for him. Okay. So his agent called and said, hey, Mr. Norris wants to know if when we come to Sacramento, if you couldn't get some of your black belts, because we're going to go to 3 different movie theaters to, to sign autographs and shake hands. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could provide some black belts for security, that would be great. And of course, how cool is that? It was a no brainer. So I asked him, I go, is there any chance that Mr. Norris can come to our school that afternoon beforehand to meet some of our students? And his agent goes, yeah, but we don't have much time. I'll give you a half an hour, but we don't have a lot of time. But yeah, we'll do that. And so I think 50 people are going to show up, and like 500 people show up. There's like a line around the building, right? And there's no time to sign autographs or shake hands. There's time to shake hands. No time to sign autographs or to take pictures. Just a line of 500 people shaking Chuck Norris's hand. So my wife is person number 132 in the mix, somewhere in there. And she goes, hi, my name's Angelina. I'm Dave's wife. They shake hands. They go about their business. Now it's time to leave to the movie theaters. My brother hops in the SUV, and we have 4 other black belts that are going to run security. And I get to ride the limo with Chuck Norris. And so I slink in the limo and I sit in the back seat, and I'm thinking, how cool is this? I get to spend the evening in the, with Chuck Norris. And he looks over at me and he says, so Dave, can your wife Angelina join us? He'd never met her before. He remembered her name after meeting 500 people. But here was the kicker. For 6 hours, he shook hands and signed autographs. And every person he did, he sincerely interacted with. But at the end of the night, we're at the final theater, and my team is putting away some barriers that the theater employees had to kind of for people to walk through to meet him. And Chuck Norris gets in the limo and he starts to drive off. He says, see you later, Dave. And I see the brake lights go on and the reverse lights go on, and he backs up and he drives past me to where my guys are and rolls down the window. And by name, there was another guy in the group called Dave. Goes, hey, Tim. Hey, Mark. Hey, Ken. Hey, Dave. Hey, Bob. Thanks for helping. That was great fun. This is after 22 days on the road, and drives off. And to this day, that was 30 years ago, those guys would go to battle for Chuck Norris in a heartbeat because of the way he made them feel. And that was one of the most impressive things I'd ever seen as far as how to interact with others. Some of you guys might remember Zig Ziglar. And Zig Ziglar would tell people, imagine everyone you meet has a sign on their chest that says, make me feel important. And that's what he did. And that's what he still does. I saw him at June Ree's funerals last time I saw him, and he was the same gracious person then.
That's lovely. That's absolutely, I've never heard a bad story about the man. And, we've had a few on the show, and it's lovely to just keep that reinforced. Sensei, it's time for your 10 questions. It's 9:30 here, Toronto time. So these are the 10 questions we ask all our guests, and we ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but feel free then to crack open your answers as you wish. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
A kind word.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Bruce Lee.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
I would go with Bruce Lee because, he was on top of movie star. He was a Renaissance man, he was, of course, I never met him, but I saw Enter the Dragon 36 times in a movie theater before, you could even buy the VHS, right? I just think that he kind of set a super high standard. And I think he was the first one to really look at being open-minded and receptive to input from various arts.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training? I've really made peace with my age and my injuries and what I can do, and I'm no longer comparing myself what I used to be able to do and wish I could. I'm eager to be able to continue to thrive in the areas with which I can still perform at a relatively high level. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Wow. Welcome. I've been watching you. You did okay.
We've touched on this a little bit. Do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, even if they're not actually a martial artist?
Favorite film and television martial artist? Bruce Lee, for sure. That would be my favorite. I like Jet Li a lot, and I like Jackie Chan a lot.
Is there a martial artist in all of recorded history, living or dead, who you'd want to train with the most?
It's a great question. Musashi, hands down.
if everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
Confidence and self-control and respect.
Our last two questions come as a pair. What's your greatest achievement and what's your greatest regret?
My greatest achievement would be my family, having a great relationship with my wife and kids. I don't have a lot of regrets. I think it would be doubt that I had that I would make it. I regret, that how many times did I lie awake, sleepless nights when challenges, doubting I would get through it versus just focusing on what I could do and knowing that it always works out. If it hasn't worked out, and it means that, how the phrase go, it always works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end. Just to have the faith, kind of my mantra is take care of the days and the years take care of themselves. All I can focus on today is getting up today, taking care of people, treating myself, being healthy, eating right, exercising, working hard, trying to be respectful of my relationships, try to grow and culture my business, and then go to bed and do the same thing tomorrow.
I absolutely love that. I'm a one day at a time kind of man myself. Thanks for that. That's a wonderful 10 questions. And now I want to go to something you talked about in the 10 questions before we back up to your tournament days. But I want to talk about now, you talked about how age, injuries, not comparing yourself. And I think that's an important conversation for us. And I think it's one we'll go around the horn on. But what has been the challenge? What have you come to with it? And how do you not compare yourself to the, competitor California days?
You can't not, but you can catch yourself when you do it. And I say something when I'm teaching a class. I'll go to do a seminar somewhere, and it's an adult class. I'll go, how many guys wish you would have started when you were younger? And almost every hand goes up. And my comment is, suck it up. You didn't. You started when you started. And the reason why you're comparing yourself with a younger version of yourself or some kid that you see in the class that's got all this potential. But it's apples and oranges. It's not fair. And so, I think, when I find myself going down that rabbit hole, I go, wait a minute, it's been a good life. Yes, I need to warm up for a few minutes before I can kick, and I'm not kicking as high as I once did. It's all good, man. It's like, it's the circle of life. It's a constant, over time, I'm starting to believe those words, and I'm starting to buy into it a little bit more. And then I also don't set myself up for failure by trying stupid stuff. Or, that psychic feels good, let me do 10 more until I did one too many, and then I'm back to where I was before. I've learned to kind of quit early, so my philosophy in training, because I still train, I exercise every day, 7 days a week. Right now I'm doing jiu-jitsu 5 days a week, but I'm not super crazy with it. But my extra 7 days a week of exercise is not super intense. I just try to do something every day that's different. But I call it the 80% rule, and that is that I never go to fatigue. Every time I've gotten an injury, in almost every case, is when I was that last 20%, when I was really tired of fatigue. So I try to quit always early. And I always I used to be martial arts, then fitness, then health, and I've switched it around. It's health first. That's my main priority, because I want to wake up feeling good in the morning. That's most important to me. Then fitness, then martial arts. And my philosophy is do martial arts for fitness. Now I do fitness so I can do martial arts. And a young kid doesn't understand that, but I don't do side kicks to stay in shape. I stay in shape so I can do an occasional side kick.
Right on. We are definitely going to go around the horn on that. I'm going to start with you, Sensei Dauphin, because I really see you connecting and nodding with a lot of what Sensei Kovar just said. So, age, injuries, not comparing yourself to, another time in your life as a martial artist. Is that part of your journey?
I'm not 100% sure that I'm there yet, Sean, because I just was talking to Sensei McLaren upstairs, and I said, I'm 51. I kind of feel like any version of myself in a physical setting, I'd be able to beat them, at least martial arts wise right now. But I know the day is coming that scale is going to tip. And so I do try and prepare myself for that day. And what I just tell myself is, let's just use a fitness example, right? When I'm using that 60-pound kettlebell to do Turkish get-ups and I do 5 aside, there's going to come a day when I'm, to Sensei Kovar, what he said, where I can't do 5 aside. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try and do like 4 aside for as many years as I possibly can, to do 4 aside and be really happy that I'm still doing 4 aside.
Right.
And hopefully, you know, when I'm 137 years old and I'm only doing one aside, I'm like, awesome. Like I'm still doing that thing that gave me joy, passion, health, benefit that I was doing when I was 51 and when I was 18. And yeah, so I think that's where I go with it. I'm not quite there yet. I don't have that wisdom yet. But I love hearing it because I know I need to hear it. Since, you know, when I talk to him on Tuesday mornings and I say, oh, my neck is girked up or my knee is sore, he always says, I got bad news for you, Randy. This is the best you're ever going to feel. And my young self, that's where my young self could beat me, Sean, in recovery.
Right.
Right. And that's,
Yeah. You know, I agree with you, Sensei. Like there's no version of my past martial arts self that could deal with my present martial arts self better. Even with a recovered knee, that, like, but absolutely that recovery's slower. Sensei Suino, let's go to you on this one. Let's talk about age, injuries, and comparison with former versions of your physical self.
Well, unlike Randy, I'm 100% sure I'm not over it yet. Man, I am pissed off because I can't do what I once did. But what it means is over the last 10 years, I've made a hobby out of longevity, right? So I'm always thinking about nutrition, about exercising in a productive way to allow me to do more martial arts, about sleep. You know, I'm a human guinea pig. I'm always experimenting on myself. And it's become an obsession. And sometimes it goes pretty well. And I'm happy to say that I think compared to a lot of people my age, I'm in pretty good shape. And I think I always joke about the curve, right? I want my martial arts curve to go like this and my death curve to go like this. And I'm trying to extend that apex out as far as I can. I will say this is one thing I love about BJJ. I could destroy my grappling self of 10 years ago with half the effort.
Right.
I can't do that. I can't say that about stand-up judo anymore. I got too much arthritis pain. I can't move with the agility that I could move 10 or 20 years ago in judo. You know, I've never been that great at karate, so I can't compare that. But and in combatives, but in BJJ, I'm just older and smarter, and I love that fact about it. And I'm sure Master Kovar, you get some of this too. I think that's one of the reasons we turn to it and continue it, is because it's not about the athleticism anymore. It's about this thing.
You know, just a quick note on that. Honestly, kata training, I love kata training. I still do it, but not as much because my hips can't handle the rotation, the hip rotation. That throws my back out. You know, but I can grapple. I go figure. I got an issue with the knee, and like you said, arthritis in my hip and my shoulder and my wrist and my ankle, and but I can grapple, and it gives me joy to be able to still be able to train at a relatively high level, because I'm not, when I spar with my guys, it's not the, I'm not even close to where I was. My old self would kill myself, put it that way, no doubt about it. In other area, but grappling.
Hanshi Legacy, where do you go with this? Facing your age, facing injuries, and facing the inevitable comparison with your younger self, or maybe it isn't inevitable?
Well, I would say that most things have been covered, but I'm just going to put it this way. At 77, which is my age, it's hard to accept that you're not able to do what you once could. Like, even though how hard I try, I still won't be able to do it. However, you would not be who you are today. I would not be who I am today. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. And I just look at other men or ladies that are my age, and, like, I can move around pretty good still, just in everyday life. You know what I mean? I feel healthier, stronger, and I don't feel my age, I guess. And that's one of the benefits until you come close to your end in martial arts. That's a benefit. That's a benefit that lasts for a lifetime. I can go out there. I can't do it as good as I can, but I can still do it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, could never do that at my age. But of course, you're grateful to the martial arts for that, to the art and your dedication to the art.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Well
Thanks,
said, sir.
Sensei Kovar, let's take you back for a few minutes to your competition period. I mean, your palmares is incredible. The number of things you won, the awards for winning, that you got recognized for being so successful. Talk about that time, whatever you want to get into, and talk about why you stopped.
Yeah, it's like I honestly, it's anybody that showed up at tournaments on a regular basis to racked up the trophies. You know what I'm saying? It's like I was a really good regional competitor, and I fought all the best guys of my generation. I fought Steve Nasty Anderson, I fought Alvin Prouder, I fought Chip Wright, I fought Steve Mad Dog Curran, and Sam Montgomery. Some of those names might ring a bell to you guys that have been around, and those were all the best guys of my generation. I pretty much lost almost all of them. Right. I was ahead of Steve Anderson for most of the match, who was the #1 fighter in the country at the time. And then he figured me out and anyway, but I loved competition, and it wasn't about as much about the competition, although it was nice to, when you're 17, bringing home the big trophy is a cool thing. Right. But I appreciated in an early age, the competition. It was the training for it that really made the difference. You know what I'm saying? And I also, I don't know about some people. I don't know where you guys were in your competition, but I honestly struggled with a confidence. Like the day before tournament, I think, why did I register for this? I'm going to get my butt kicked. That morning, I would think, what am I doing here? And then once we bowed in, I was fine. But I wanted to get over that. I wanted to be able to kind of show up like a lot of guys that could barely wait to get in the ring. I pretended like I could barely wait to get in the ring, but the reality was I was scared to death to get in the ring. And so eventually it got easier. But what happened is that I remember thinking I was old. My last tournament, I think I was 29 years old, and I thought it was time. But I ended up fighting a guy named Hakeem Austin, who was like the #2 fighter, rated fighter in the country. He was one of the guys that was on the WNBC Masters. Do you remember that show back in the day? But he just destroyed me, dislocated my shoulder in the process. But I remember. So I would like that my last fight, I kind of wished it wasn't the worst fight. By the way, it was in the finals, so I done well that day up to there. But I guess my point my school was starting to thrive. We had a few years, and I realized that I saw these guys going to tournaments, and guys that continue to compete in tournaments all the time. There were guys that struggled professionally. And I realized if I'm waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about the next karate tournament, that's not going to help me grow my school. So I made a conscious shift I'm done with that chapter. I'm going to take all that energy. I'm going to focus into my students and growing my business. And that was really the impetus for us to take off. And I made several attempts. I was going to get back on my 40th birthday. I was going to fight, but then I hurt my back, and then I was going to do a week half of Filipino Weaponry World Championship tournament, and I messed my wrist up a couple months before, and that's why I'm doing a jiu-jitsu tournament here in next month. Is because I want to do another one just for the sake of it. But it was an important experience for me. And I learned a lot from it, but I kind of feel like I want to take the shift off myself and put it on what I was trying to accomplish, and winning another trophy really wasn't going to do that. And like I said, who am I to tell somebody else what their journey should be? But I went to a tournament about 2 years ago just to poke my head, and it was a local one. And I knew some guys. I had a couple students competing, and I saw a guy there that I recognized. He was fighting the old man's division, and he looked like a guy I used to compete against. He looked like his grandfather. And I go, oh, oh man, that looks like so-and-so's grandfather. And I get a little closer, and he goes, hey, Kovar, it's the same guy. He's been competing in tournaments for 50 years, and more power to him, but that's not where I want to spend every Saturday. I spent plenty of Saturdays in a hot, sweaty gymnasium, and there's other things I'd rather do now. And so that was an important part of my experience in my development. But there came a time when I never really regretted not, giving it up, so to speak, I guess.
Again, I don't want to push this humility idea, but I just popped over to the page that I was looking at earlier. First place over 90 times, including 4 grand champion titles. Sounds like a little more than a decent regional competitor.
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And like in Northern California, I was the guy in Sacramento for a few years. You know what I'm saying? So to speak, I was the man. From there, I would have told you about it too. But in the bigger scheme of things, when I'd go to the big events, I could never take home the big. I did win a national title. But I competed in probably 50 big events. You know what I'm saying? Like high level events, and I only placed in a couple, so that's what I mean by that. Like I didn't really, when I fought Steve Nasty Anderson, there was no doubt who's the better fighter. He was a whole nother level. Or my last one, Hakeem Alston, there was no doubt. It was like I was out of my league completely. It would be like grappling with Higgin, Gracie, you know what I'm saying? Or Hickson Gracie, excuse me, or Higgin Machado. It would be that level, the difference, So I was, like I said, I think I was a decent regional guy, but I showed up a lot. I won a lot of trophies because I competed every weekend for years. So there's a lot of tournaments I didn't win.
Yeah. And then when you look at the competitions today, and you're talking about those nerves, and you're talking about the value of facing that. What do you think are the pros and cons of how the tournaments look when you check them out these days compared
Well,
to
I was in Orlando a couple of weeks ago for an event that I was speaking at. It was in concert with the US Open, which is a big NASCA tournament. And I hadn't been to a big tournament in a long time. And what I was impressed with was, first off, the kata. Of course, you have the XMA stuff that they do that, you can like or not like, but you can't argue with the skill level. But the traditional kata, there was some beautiful stuff. And the point fighting, the modern point fighting, I don't quite get it. It's a little different than what I was used to, but I don't want to be that bitter guy that goes back in my day, because I was watching these guys and they're pretty darn good at what they do. It's definitely more point than we used to do. It's definitely more, you can pick it apart, but the guy, I was watching the guys in the finals, and I wouldn't, under those rules set, I wouldn't last 30 seconds. You know what I'm saying? They're so fast off the line. And then you look at the application of that and you see like what Stephen Wonderboy Thompson or, a Machida has been able to do with karate and MMA. It's pretty cool. And so there is that, we all know there's an explosive off the line power that you can get if you've done that kind of thing. So I walked away kind of like partially like, what's modern karate come to? It's not like back in the day. And part of me was going, okay, it's evolved in a lot of ways. They're way better. I don't think they're as tough as the Mike Stone, Joe Louis, Bill Wallace days, Chuck Norris days. But I think technically, the rule set that they have, they're really good.
Right on. And yeah, Hanshi Legacy, what do you think about that? Like your days tournaments versus now's? I mean, I know our last Matsumoto challenge was pretty excellent, but in general, what do you think the pros and cons are of the different ways of, scoring? And
I guess I would say things were more basic back in my time. We're talking about 71, around there sometime. Where's there's hard right reverse punch, front kicks, reach hands, roundhouse kicks, sometimes wheel kicks. It was like always using the best possible basic that you could. Some guys like Super Footballs, for instance, had those abilities beyond that, and that's sort of what makes those guys a little bit different. Nowadays, I see these young guys from like Silent Tiger. They just stand there, and as soon as you move, they jump up in the air and they kick you like 5 or 6 times in scoring places. And so what's the difference to me there is the ring is a game. You could take 1 or 2 of those kicks in the face and in the body and still finish the guy off in a real fight. So there's the game of karate, and then there's when it comes down to having the intestinal fortitude to stand and face somebody who's willing to take your life. Well, I'm not sure that they'd be using their fancy little kicks to be kicking as opposed to be running.
mm-hmm.
So it's a different type of development when your martial arts comes from the inside, and you've trained yourself so many ways that way that you're willing to stand there and fight until you die. It's a completely different situation. You're going for a trophy or standing there defending yourself while somebody's trying to knock your ass out. So they're both good, but people have to realize what they're doing. They are the thing that breaks all that to me, and which I love. People used to laugh at me back in the Bruce Lee day. Thank you for bringing that up. because I took karate. They took Bruce Lee and everything was great. But when it all comes down to it, oh, karate is better, kung fu's better, taekwondo's better. Well, here's the MMA. It allows to, no matter what you say, you step in the ring, try to knock the guy out. How many kung fu guys have you seen in the MMA? How many taekwondo guys have you seen in the MMA? They're karate and jiu-jitsu guys. To me, in my own personal opinion, the arts that were brought up to this age that were the most reliable to do the best job, in my opinion.
Thanks, Hanchi.
Not that, and I'll just add this for the other, not that a good taekwondo guy and a good kung fu guy couldn't be good, but for some reason, it takes a bit longer to be a good kung fu guy. And I'm not sure about taekwondo.
Sensei Suino, I know you have a question for us before we wind up.
Well, I know we're getting close to the end, and this is a major shift, but I'd just like to hear a couple of minutes, Master Kovar. At one time, I was a big follower of some of the same folks you mentioned, Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, and I learned a lot. And I thought there was a lot of comparison and contrasting with the lessons that we learn in martial arts. I'd just love to hear kind of what your thoughts were on that topic, whether there was, whether you see them in lockstep parallel, or if there's different lessons learned in the kind of personal development realm versus martial arts. What do you think about that?
I think inherent in martial arts training is a unique, people that do martial arts want to improve. There's a personal development component whether they know it or not. That's why they're there. I mean, how many people do we all know that have no interest? They haven't matured or grown in any way since they got out of high school or college. You know, they're just living their life. And who's to say that's a bad thing? You know, but I know us as martial artists, we're striving always, right? And then if you look at every great philosopher from any culture, from any part of time, you know, truth is truth, you know, and they come out kind of the same, so it's the same parallels. You know, if you look at like the, you know, the 5 spirits of Buddha and you compare that to Stephen Covey's work, there's a lot of relationships to that. You know what I'm saying? And so I found my work with that, all the you know, all the personal development stuff that I did it because I wanted to. I had a parent of a student call me. I trained with this gal named Shanti, trained with me for about a year in about 1980. And about 10 years later, or 8 years later, her dad called me and they'd moved away. And he called me because he wanted to know about a martial arts school in Oregon that I could recommend. And he said, oh, by the way, that year that Shanti trained with you was the most impactful year she ever had. It changed her life. And I'm not talking about the sidekick. I'm talking about her, you know, her life skills. And I share that with you because we all know this to be true. But back then I didn't teach any life skills. I did nothing. We you know, we bowed on the mat. We just, you know, eye gouge, groin kick, you know, it didn't matter the age of the kids. It was, you know, hardcore stuff. And it got me thinking, man, if I was to make it a point to really stress courtesy, self-control, respect, like most Japanese and Okinawan arts were already doing, but I wasn't, okay? To the next level. That's why, you know, Grandmaster Ree was such a, you know, an important person to me. It got me thinking. So I went out and I tried to take every one of those lessons and I wrote a bunch of, we still use them, a bunch of scripts for our kids program about, you know, good habits, good self-control, good manners, good character, you know, all that stuff that was really strongly influenced by all those people. And we still use them to this day because especially people of all ages, but especially kids, they're like a sponge. Their mind is open. And you know, people remember when their head is clear and they're paying attention and they're emotionally engaged. And when we do our job right as instructors, we've got those kids' undivided attention. You know, we're real life superheroes. And when we sit down and we talk to them about the importance of self-discipline and respect and trying hard and being courteous, and you tell it in form of stories and you reinforce it with exercise on the floor, it's a whole nother level of impact that you can have. So that's been an important part of our program, is trying to kind of take some of the material and make sure that and then I've been training with a gentleman named Shion Mikao Nishiuchi for the last 30 years. And he's been my Iaido and Kobudo teacher. And he's like, you know, he grew up in post-World War Japan and an amazing guy. And I've learned so much, you know, not as much the curriculum, but really kind of an authentic martial outlook from him. You know, about that, I've also tried to do my best to integrate that back into our program to the best of our abilities in kind of a, you know, in a modern way, if that makes sense.
100%.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. You know, the first time I ever found a path of self-improvement, it was this. And then this led me to seek all those others, including like, you know, I've never met the man, but working through all that Tony Robbins stuff and looking at Eckhart Tolle and Pema Chodron and anything I can pull in to grow that next level spiritual, that next level one day at a time, that next level, whatever. And I just feel so lucky that, you know, again, Hanshi Legacy, like week one, I hear the word Zen flesh, Zen bones. And I'm like, what is that? And now I'm on a journey that includes, but isn't about punches and kicks. And it's changed my life.
I know we have very little time. I have to brag for a minute. I was actually on stage when Tony Robbins got his black belt. There's actually a picture floating around. June Reed promoted Tony Robbins to black belt. Ernie Reyes was there and I was there. And you can see me, you see 2/3, it's kind of a Where's Waldo pose picture. In the background, you see most of my face, you know, but anyway, so that was anyway, fun facts.
Well, I was so disappointed when I went to a Tony Robbins event in Chicago, and on day one he was talking about his life and stuff, and he said he stopped doing martial arts, right? And I was just like, oh, come on, man! Like, you had all this other stuff going on. How did you ever stop? Of course, I couldn't ask him because I was one of 3,000 people in the audience. But that's a cool story. I'm gonna go find that picture with you in there.
My one joke with Tony Robbins, because I love the work he does, is on a lot of his tapes, he'll be like, you know, I had 6 yachts. Now I tell you this not to impress you. And I had a girlfriend who would just be like, babe, I just won a karate tournament. Now I'm not telling this to impress you. Oh, wait, that one I did tell you to impress you. That one was to impress you, babe. But I love the he was the original humble brag on the personal power. Sensei Kovar, you know, this has been wonderful. The way we wind up our show is we go around the horn and we start with Hanshi Legacy, and we just say a little bit about our time with you, and then the last word will go to you before some housekeeping. So Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
Sensei, I had a great time. I mean, this was a ground level, no bull, very refreshing conversation, so that we get to walk through the real things in martial arts that we don't excite ourselves out of shape. And I picked a lot of things up from it just because it was very, very, you know, it sort of suit everyone's martial art, what we were talking about.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to speak with you, sir.
Yeah. And hopefully maybe we can continue again at some other time, sure, or run across paths.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It would be my honor and privilege.
Thank you very much.
Sensei Suino.
Master Kovar, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, your name is well known in the martial arts world, and you know, I've heard your name and I've come across some of your materials over the years. It's a real delight to be able to put together a real person with all the things I've heard and read, and find at the core of it, you really are a martial artist. That I value more than anything. And I like the fact that you and I are kind of in the same battle or the same stage of life, trying to extend this game as long as we can, get a little bit more training out of it, and have as much joy. And thanks so much for being here. Hope we get a chance to talk again.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dauphin.
Yeah, so Sensei Kovar, I just want to say I muted Sensei Legacy a couple of times and you saw us chatting. One of our really good friends, Sensei Copeland, sent a couple messages in. He said, made me feel really good. He said, Randy, you look like the younger version of Sensei Legacy, because we're sitting here right now together side by side with the same shirts on. And then if you don't know him, he said, imagine if I was sitting between you guys behind you, it'd be like a reverse Oreo cookie. He said, right? And so if you know Sensei Copeland, that's why we were kind of giggling and chatting. So I love when he sends that stuff in. But I always write copious notes, Sensei Kovar, and 45 years full-time school owner. Sensei Legacy says you're a quitter in martial arts if you stop before 30 years. So as a school owner, you're 15 years past that, right? I like that you said long-term success equals martial arts first, passion, and a lifestyle. This is really, I'm going to write this one down. I'm thinking about it. Like you said it, you can't talk yourself out of a behavior that brought you into it. I like that. Like, I think a lot of people do that. They rationalize themselves out of something or rationalize themselves into why they're in a situation. And it's a behavior that brought you there. You got to stop the behavior. So we asked about advice, product, number one. Number two, hard work, right? Like, I like that you got to have a product and then you got to work hard. I also like that you talked about I think it's something people don't think about much anymore, supply and demand. In the 70s, there was a lot of demand and not much supply. And now we got a lot of demand, but it's a broad spectrum of supply. And the good martial artists have to push themselves up and demonstrate that their product is better. Ethical business. You never do hard sales. You know, I don't even like to talk to people about price when they come in. I like them to come in and I just say, look, just try it out for 2-3 weeks. Like, just come on in here and see if you like it. And what are you trying to get? So I like that. Don't do hard sales, charge a fair price, focus on retention. I was just talking about this before. Like, I love the people that I have and I want to keep them, right? Not at the expense of new people coming in. I'd rather keep the 4 or 5 that I really love that are invested in it than gain 20 that are going to be gone in a year. So it was nice to hear that. Be genuine. And you don't have to be slick. I've known a lot of slick karate teachers who are like, they've got this used car salesman. You don't have any of that. And you're a very successful business person. I like that you said, I didn't find martial arts found me. I think all of us will nod our head that, you know, martial arts found us. It was a calling. And I can tell that it's a calling for you. Because you painted houses by day and then you taught karate by night. We all had to be in those places, right?
Sure.
Shuriha, you talked about that. I think that's really good. And your connection with your first instructor, that resonates with me. I think it's interesting that nobody's talked about this, but it's a truism, is the movie era and the eras and how those have all impacted our dojos. You talked about the 70s and the Bruce Lee areas and the 80s and Karate Kid and the 90s and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and how UFC, even though that's not a movie and it kind of was, right? Like how that impacted all of us, right? When Sensei Copeland asked about your great memories, you remember the dates because of the way it was important to you and how it made you feel, right? I agree with that too. 10 questions, effective move. You're the first person to say a kind word. Influential of all time. You said Bruce Lee, which is the same sense of legacy. We were chatting about that too. God, you said welcome. That's what Sense of Legacy said as well when he was on. That whole discussion about your next 5 years making peace with your age. For me, that was good to hear. I know we're all kind of in that realm now. You said Bruce Lee, Jet Li, Jackie Chan. We all love those guys. Sensei Mustard, Rob Mustard, will be upstairs shortly. He said the same answer as you. Who could you train with? He said Miyamoto Musashi as well. That's really resonates with me. And Sense Legacy, when you said greatest benefit, confidence. That's what Sense Legacy. And then you also said, I don't do sidekicks for fitness anymore. I do fitness so I can throw more sidekicks. I love that shift. That's 100%. People are like, why do you work out so much, Randy? I just want to do martial arts for as long as I can at the highest level possible. And I know fitness is going to help me with that. And when we were muted, I looked at Sensei Legacy and I said, I really like Sensei Kovar. He's a genuine person and he's really honest. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This time flew by and I really hope we can, I hope if I'm in Sacramento, I can come and bang on your door and have a coffee.
Of course.
With you.
It'd be my honor. Enjoyed the time. Absolutely. Thank you for the feedback. You seriously took some good notes.
Sensei, I just want to add, I wrote down a kind word as well. I've gotten out of almost all my altercations with just presence and a kind word. The other thing, you said take care of the days and the years take care of themselves. In my world, truer words have never been spoken. I can't make a plan for next year that will look even remotely the way I think today, but I can probably make tomorrow pretty close to what I think it'll be and execute something that'll be helpful and useful. We have a saying in car racing, take care of the grams and the pounds will take care of themselves. And when you said that, that really resonated. And lastly, you know, I love how much of a fan you are of these people. Like, you know, Sensei Suino said, your name rings out. But when you talk about these people, you're like an actor who doesn't know they're famous meeting another famous actor. And it's really lovely to see the joy you have at having met these martial artists, even while you're one of them who belongs in that room or that car. And I personally love that. I never want to lose that. And I like that you haven't either. Is there anything you want to say to go out on?
You know, it's been great fun, guys. Really, what's funner than, you know, you've been able to tell your story with talking with cool guys that love martial arts. That's as good as it gets, you know. I would say kind of my take on things is I met there's a gentleman, Grandmaster James Matosi, and Grandmaster Matosi was Ed Parker's instructor, and he actually died in Folsom Prison. And I had a chance. And it's another story for another day. He's a very controversial figure in Kempo worlds, right? And he had one of the first schools, the official self-defense club in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1945 to 48 or something like that. And anyway, I got a chance to meet him when I was like 19. I used to go visit him. I probably saw him 20. I actually have a black belt diploma from him. I didn't do anything to deserve it. I was at the right place at the right time. And I ended up with a black belt diploma from him, which nobody has. But here's my point. He told me something. I used to go visit him, and he was a cross between whatever his record was. I'm going to take that off the table for another discussion. He was a cross between Yoda and Mr. Miyagi. Okay. And I would go there and I'd ask really important questions that 19-year-olds would ask. What's better, a front kick or a side kick? And when I do a fist, should I hold my finger like this or like that? You know, all these kind of stuff, right? And he would kind of shake his head and he would give me the answer. But then he would say, you know, Dave, it's, you know, that's fine, but true self-defense is defending yourself, not just about that, you know. And I'm paraphrasing, but it was defending yourself against sickness, injury, apathy, bad attitude, yours and others, you know, and not just the bad guy. And I didn't really understand it when I was 19, but I've come to really appreciate it. And I kind of feel like you know, it's great to be able to, you know, what's the best knife defense? I don't know. The best knife defense is not to go to the bar that night. That's probably the best knife defense, right? But how many people are concerned about you know, the most lethal technique? And I get it, man. I want my stuff to be good, guys. Don't get me wrong. I want my stuff to be good, and I want to be able to defend my family if I need to. But I also know I'm probably not going to die in a back alley knife fight. I'm probably going to die because I abused my body in a way that I could have avoided, you know what I mean, by taking better care of myself. And I really feel like that's the message that I want to try to relate, you know, to my students, you know, and my family is, yeah, man, hit and kick hard, train hard, you know, be ready to go. But man, you know, to do, you know, take, you know, be in control, you know, take your weather with you. You know what I'm saying? Don't let the weather outside determine your outlook, and do everything in your powers to, you know, treat, you know, I have a mantra. I take great care of myself because the world needs me at my best. If I want to be good for my family and for my community, my students, I need to be taking care of myself first, and I need to be looking out for that, you know, and so that's, I think, as I mature as a martial artist, that becomes more and more important, is it doing my best to kind of live the lifestyle, you know, and really be as genuine as I possibly can be. And I think that's the best self-defense.
Thank you so much for that. What an incredible button. I just want to say, before I throw it to Sensei Dauphin for next week, I'm just going to say thanks to Mike Russell, Justin Shea, Andre Sadashev, Robert Shlumsky, Jesse Vlevital, Alden Adair, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, and Christiana Landau for their help behind the scenes with the show. I did not read those names out last week, so I wanted to make sure I got to it. And Sensei Dauphin, what do we got coming up?
What we got coming up is tomorrow and the next 4 days, since they see we're wearing these shirts. If on the back of Sensei Legacy shirt, you'll see, there it is. Yeah, we can see it, Sensei. Whistler Camp, BC. We do a camp out here. We do a camp in Ontario. This one's the biggest one we've ever done in BC. We have almost 40 people coming to this camp to go up. And when I say 40 people, it's like an inner organization camp, mostly brown and black belts. It's going to be really good high-level training, good connections. I'm back in the Rocky Mountains. 4 days ago, I was in the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming with Sensi Suino. It's weird how life brings you. Like now I'm in the Rocky Mountains with Sensi Legacy. So like all within like a week and a half. So I just want to vomit that out to everybody. But the things that are coming up, I just want to go into the next couple of weeks. Got a host chat coming up. I love the host chats. For me, they give me a lot of energy when we all get to connect. The four of us get to connect and chat. So I'm looking forward to that. And reminding people that sign on, anybody, former guests, whoever, you want to sign on, ask a question, get the camera on, have a little conversation with us. Like we really love that too. And then after that, we have one of the Northern Karate School's directors, Tony La Silva, who since Suino and I were just in his dojo, beautiful dojo. He's one of the big time directors in Northern Karate School under Hanshi Cesar Burkowski. Been with him for decades, spawned like thousands of black belts. Really excited to be chatting with him. He's a really nice person and a really great martial artist. So that's what we got coming up in the next couple of weeks, Sean.
Thanks so much, Sensei Dauphin. What an incredible night. What an incredible, evening for us all, spread out across the country and the continent. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week for our host chat, and be safe till then. Thank you,
Thanks,
Sensei.
everybody. Thanks, Master Kovar.
Sensei Kovar, thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.